I always tell them, there's a lot of low hanging fruit here that's going to cost your new club nothing that you can do just by changing some priorities around. And you're going to get the confidence and trust of that membership or those players or whoever you're working for, and that's you're going to be able to build on that year after year. But sometimes they try to do everything all at once, and they're double aerifying their first week on the job, and double, they're like, oh, these greens have a lot of thatch. Well, listen, man, you get through the first year, don't make any crazy mistakes. Sometimes though, it's like talking to a wall. I mean I could see in your face that you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You'll feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy. I'm super excited today to be sharing the podcast with and joined by Jim Pavonetti, who was recently recognized with the 2025 GCSAA President's Award for Environmental Stewardship, a very rare distinction and an honor. And Jim, I know this has been something not necessarily that you were seeking out, but environmental stewardship has been part of kind of your DNA as a superintendent for a while. So thanks for joining on, first and foremost. And then secondly, what's been the evolution of your own philosophy around environmental stewardship?
Well, I always had love for the outdoors. Just as a kid, going fishing at the local pond all day. I'd be one of those kids that would be just as happy to fish a 10-hour day by myself at 10, 11 years old. And so when I started working on a golf course, I just could see how you're working with nature, and this is like before the onset of Audubon International and things like that. But just seeing nature outside every day basically resonated with me and led me into this career. So I always had some environmental thoughts behind what we're doing, and as I became more and more educated in that, and as an assistant superintendent when Audubon started to promote their certification thing, I really that was like, well, this is all like coming to a head. And so that's just how it sort of started.
And in your career standpoint, talk a little bit about where you're at right now and kind of trace your steps of how you got to the position you're in.
So it's the old fashioned way of working my way up from the bottom, working my way up from picking up cigarette butts in the clubhouse parking lot to becoming, I worked at a municipal course, and I was lucky enough to have my hands in just about everything. I assisted the mechanic, did all the reel grinding, so I learned all of that stuff. And we're talking, I'm in 11th and 12th grade. Then, getting my spray license at the age of 18 and taking over all of the spray programs, fertilization, you name it, and then doing the day-to-day height and quality of cut. So it was almost like an assistant and a mechanic at the same time, and I was just really a crew guy by title. So then as I got out of high school, went to the Rutgers winter program, and then became an assistant superintendent at a private club, then got to see how private clubs do things versus municipalities, and going from 50,000 rounds to 14,000 rounds. That's kind of a culture shock too. Then was an assistant for a few years, 5 or 6 years, and started to apply to superintendent jobs, and was lucky enough. My first superintendent job was West Point Golf Course. Great way to start a career as a superintendent. They were at that time pretty behind the times as far as agronomy and day-to-day operations. So coming in there as a new superintendent, just about anything I did was considered an improvement. So I gained a lot of confidence in the golfers. They loved everything that they saw. I was planning to be there for maybe 5 years, which I thought that was my plan, to be there for 5 years, really long enough to become a certified superintendent and get Audubon certification done. But within my second season, I ended up getting an opportunity to go to a bigger club and private club, so which was up in the Saratoga area at the Edison Club. So that's 27 holes, private country club, which was another great stepping stone for me. Actually, we just planned to make our lives there. My kids were born up there. I was there for 5 years. Um, Growing up in the New York Met area, I always had my eyes open for a good job down here, but it would have to be the right opportunity and everything. And when Fairview came along and everything seemed to line up perfectly, it just worked out. Over 300 applicants, and for some reason they chose me, and here I am 18 years later. But in your, how it is when you have been at a job for a certain amount of time, it's still in your mind that this is your new job. But meanwhile, when I came here, my kids were 1 and 3, and they're going to be 20 and 22 in a month. So it goes by quick.
It's funny. I was just giving a presentation at the Wisconsin Golf Symposium, and we were talking about how to land your career job, your dream job. And essentially, what I kind of said is, you're not become an overnight success, but a lot of times it feels like that. It feels like this just happened, right? When you land that premier job. So it's funny you made that comment. How did the club, like currently where you're at, like how did you get buy-in from the membership around environmental stewardship? And we talked before I started hitting recording that oftentimes that environmental stewardship isn't necessarily a top priority. It's sort of a conceptual type thing, or it's a great initiative, but maybe not a priority. So how did you get your membership to buy in?
Well, I think with starting with some baby steps of some environmental things, doing stuff that won't affect playability to start, because you don't want something to become a negative, growing some crazy buffer strips that are heavily in play, and then all of a sudden, then you'll have members saying, I just landed in the Audubon. Like, that's the last thing you want something like that to come across. So something as easy as nesting boxes, where they're like all of a sudden seeing all these bluebirds around tees, and it's just like flying, colorful birds, and they start to buy in on that stuff. And then talking about conserving water. So our property has no ability to recharge. Our irrigation water is on our property, and the only thing that recharges it is rain. So if we go through a long stretch with no rain, the ponds get lower and lower, and these are feature ponds on beautiful golf holes. So the last thing you want to see is low ponds, and sometimes we do have low ponds, but the idea of conserving water so that the ponds look better is maybe the way the members will look at it, versus we're also saving some money and energy and things like that. And we're also creating a better golf course by conserving water and by not using. So I think you just got to start with small steps that all begin and end with positive outcomes, to the general single digit handicapper, to, the older generation that are 30 plus handicappers, but they're benefiting it in some way. We're saving water, we're using less chemicals, the golf course is more resilient. When others are around us are having bad years, we're still having a good year. And none of that happens overnight. So a lot of that is baby steps that start to become something eventually.
I was gonna ask you, like, when if you go to a new property or you're starting at from ground zero, like, what do the first steps look like to get involved? Because I remember being a superintendent and thinking the same thing, like, "Man, there's so many opportunities here, whether it's bird boxes, whether it's native areas, whether it's, just our wash pad area, like, there's opportunities here to improve," but, like, where do you suggest people start?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where that property is. If you get to a property that already has a bunch of nest boxes, maybe you start to see how if the membership even knows about them or what the story is with them, and then put together some interesting articles, especially with really good photography, about what they're all about, and it gains a little bit of interest. If it's something where you see a lot of opportunity of using less water and creating a firmer, faster golf course. Well, now you already got you got the attention of all the single digit handicappers, right? And you got the attention of a lot of the decision makers that are probably going to be the better golfers. And so you may be saying, it's also the environmentally thing, right thing to do by conserving water, but in their mind, you're also making a better golf course. So you have their buy-in anyway. And on top of that, what's an environmental thing? So, my club uses some of my environmental achievements when they're talking to a family and they're vetting a family for membership, and they're on the edge between us and another club in the area. And then they will start, and if it's, let's say it's a family with small kids, they'll hit them with all the environmental achievements that this club has that maybe the other club doesn't have, and it sways them over to Fairview, and then right there, that money's going to the bottom line. And so that's been successfully done multiple times here.
That's really interesting. I've never, heard somebody speak in that way that they leverage that for, membership attraction and things of that nature. So kudos to you guys for thinking outside the box. One of the things that I hear that comes up in a lot of search committee meetings is the idea of using data, right? And using data to drive decisions, whether that's green speeds, whether that's aerification programs, whether it's water management, chemicals for things of that nature. How do you use data and benchmarks to drive decision making as it relates to environmental stewardship?
Mhm. So let's face it. So if you go back 30 years ago and you would say, somebody might say, we really weren't using much data back then. But we always were. We were using estimates. You would look at your greens mower operator and say, "Did you get any grass today?" And they'd say, "A little bit." And then you'd say, "Did you get more than yesterday or less than yesterday?" And like, about the same. But like, we don't. You don't have like it was 3 gallons of clippings, right? So you were using data, but it was all estimates and guesstimates and experience. Um, and so when you start to actually put real numbers into it and you realize how wrong you were so many years and how you might have misused some of your intuition, and now you've got your intuition combined with real numbers, the decision making now becomes so much more obvious. We don't need to roll today. The greens are already I'll get when we get into the fall, I'll go out before I even have the jobs posted. I'll go out and measure the speed in the dew. And if the greens are already at the speed range, why am I sending out mowers to go beat up the greens even more? Maybe just send out the roller by itself just to break the dew so it looks nice and clean and dry for the players. But so like things like that. Otherwise, oh well, it's Wednesday. We mow greens every day, but like when you have some of this data, you can save money. You could be a little bit easier on your turf. You can you know redirect some of that labor to other things that you were hoping to get to. So the data has become really important. Do you? let it drive everything. No, it's like sort of a tool that you're using to just make things better and easier, because weather drives everything here, so it's like you can making some mistakes, it's hard to get that time back, and sending 20 guys out to do something that you could have done so much better. So a lot of times the data saves you on that.
This goes into this next question is when you look at golf course management over the next decade, I'm sure it's certainly evolved in your career, but what do you see as the biggest challenge and also the biggest opportunity golf course maintenance leaders and clubs face, as it relates to just day-to-day course management?
So the technology, I mean, look at what has happened in the last 5 years with technology. Now, I mean,
Mm,
I've got clubs down the street from me that already have 10 robots mowing and high-end clubs, and so you've got things like that, drones, all that stuff. So that stuff's gonna continue, right? So that's gonna maybe hopefully make our jobs a little bit easier. But I also think, some of the environmental things that I'm doing and it's just become it's normal for us. We're always looking to do something better every year, whether it's agronomy, environmentalism, whatever. But um, I think that people are going to have to understand that these best management practices and BMP manuals and things that's going to become more and more real in areas of the country where it's not taken as seriously right now. GCSAA was smart enough to see that and go into that initiative. And now, they're working on getting clubs to officially buy into it and somehow adopt it. Um, Either through some type of certification or at least some official adoption besides you having a manual that you just stick in a shelf or on a hard drive, putting it to practice is a whole nother deal. And I think that that's just going to become more and more important that younger superintendents coming into this profession are going to have to understand that you know, water is a commodity and chemicals are becoming harder and harder to keep legal and learning how to make your turf a little more resilient and stretching some of those parameters so that you don't lose grass, you still have a perfect golf course or a great golf course. But not necessarily chemically driven and all that and getting things to survive in the heat of the summer or the winter or that kind of stuff. So I think that that's just going to become more and more important. I mean, it's coming. I mean, there's no hiding
yeah.
from it.
This is one thing I want to commend you on, and I always enjoy speaking with superintendents that um, take on these initiatives and they kind of continue to seem to reinvent themselves. But How did you stay fresh in this industry, and like, how do you stay engaged in this industry? Because I think it's a trait that I really admire. To stay in the profession as long as you have, like what would you attribute that to?
I think just going from the forums on the GCSA website and the TurfNet website, that was like our introduction. Guys like me and you, that's like our introduction to social media, and then it went to a whole nother level where now you're connected to thousands and thousands of people through the Facebook groups and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. So, you start to see like, I'm watching these guys in Canada measure clipping yields, and I'm like, what in the world are they? What are they going to get out of that? Like, I don't need that. And after certain amount of time of seeing it, I'm like, I'm going to just try it and see what the difference is and see. I'm never happy with my growth regulation. And maybe that's why. And seeing like how a simplest thing in the world is collecting the clippings and measuring them every day and saying, oh, the growth is out of control. I'm going to up my growth regulation and make sure I'm not adding any fertility to it. And now I'm saving money. I'm keeping the green speeds where they want where the membership wants them, and I'm using data instead of feel. And the feel and the data become really powerful versus using one by itself or the other by itself. So um, that's that. So once I started to see stuff like that, I'm an avid reader. I like to see what other people are doing, and then sometimes I just see what someone's doing, and it gives me an idea to try something different, try something else, and if it works, I have this whole list that I keep good logs of every move we make all year, and then I pretty much spend all of Thanksgiving and holiday season reevaluating all that for next year's agronomic program. And I update our maintenance standards, which I think is something that's heavily underutilized in our industry. I think everybody should have a solid maintenance standards manual that they revisit every year, every other year with their greens committee. And so this is what we're doing. This is what we could do. This is what we should do. And always defining that next level. So you're not going to survive very long at a high end club um, without some defined next level, because somebody's going to define it for you if you don't define it. And they're going to be like, we need to make a move here because we need somebody that's going to bring this course to the next level. Well, if you're the guy giving them the next level, you're you're their answer. So I think that's huge. That's really important.
I am glad you brought that up. And that was not scripted for our viewers, but our listeners. I find myself in a lot of different interactions where I come back to, if they had a maintenance standard, a lot of the disagreements between GM, superintendent, board members, whatever, or if I'm a board member and I'm getting it from, this group or this group, hey, here's our maintenance standards, here's what we've done, and here's what we're continuing to do. I think it would negate a lot of tough conversations, or pretty much a lot of BS that they don't have to deal with, because it would be defined. And I think it would give superintendents a little bit more of a roadmap versus, again, what's your favorite flavor on Saturday and Sunday after playing the morning round with the men's group? You know what I mean? Like, I think it would help, but how did you go about developing those? And how does your club, leverage and integrate those maintenance standards?
So I read this article years and years ago in the USGA, back when they still sending the magazine out, the USGA Green Section newsletter, and it was defining your standards. And I did it as a young superintendent, and then every year, and then I thought though that it would be even more important to also define future standards. So that's what so like if you go to my section on greens, it shows basically everything that we do to greens, what the height of cut is during in season, how many times we roll, what our green speed goals are. Now with the GS3, what our smoothness and trueness goals are, keeping it under this number or whatever. So we've got all that, and then I always will sit back in the down time of the season when I'm reviewing that and saying, well, what can we do to make greens better this year? What did we try something this year that we should implement season long now that's going to just bring our greens to the next level? And maybe some things are doable and some things are pie in the sky, and some things, you might look at fairways and say, I want to do XGD drainage in all of the low spots in the fairways. And it might not be something that you can do this year, but you can put a number on it, and you can put it in as part of a long range planning. So I get that at the end of my maintenance standards, the bigger picture items, if it was like rebuilding T complexes or something like that, I've got some numbers, get numbers together, and then I have that as like a bullet point list of like large long range planning items. I even include equipment in that too. So I have, you put like a 5-year equipment wish list / replacement list of things that you absolutely have to replace, and stuff like that. So not the people that appreciate that most are the finance committee and the guys that handle all the money, and they're like, oh, at least we know Pavonetti needs, $300,000 worth of equipment next year. So, all right, so that is done. That's approved. And then, none of the other departments are going to be that far ahead. So, like, you're going to always win all those battles too. So, especially if you have a really good, plan that the Green Committee buys in. Hopefully, some of your members on the Green Committee are on the Finance Committee, and at least, besides your Greens chairman, maybe you have at least one other board member on that committee too. So, you get some voices in those rooms to back you up and say, like, listen, he's got a plan. We agree with it. We think this is great, and this is how much it's going to cost. And we can either afford it this year, or we'll figure out a way to afford it in the coming years. But, having that growth defined all the time keeps you viable, keeps the confidence of the membership. Like, this is our guy, and we trust him. Those are important things for longevity.
Yeah, man, kudos to you for that. So I want to end this how we're ending our podcast now by asking this one simple question. If you had to go back and give advice to a young up and comer in this industry or a younger Jim Pavonetti, what would that be?
So, and you've seen this probably 1,000 times by now with your business, but a first year superintendent, I tell everyone that I know when they get a job, I'll give them a call or go visit them to congratulate them on their new job. And I beg them to try not to do everything all at once, but it's hard. You work so hard for that job, and you see all this, I always tell them, there's a lot of low hanging fruit here that's going to cost your new club nothing, that you can do just by changing some priorities around, and you're gonna get the confidence and and trust of that membership or those players or whoever you're working for, and that's you're going to be able to build on that year after year. But sometimes they try to do everything all at once, and they're double aerifying their first week on the job, and double, they're like, oh, these greens have a lot of thatch. Well, listen, man, they're you get through the first year, don't make any crazy mistakes. So that sometimes though, you're like, it's like talking to a wall. I mean, I could see in your face that you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I stress that to all my assistants that move on and get their first job, and even guys around the area that when they get a job around me, I always tell them the same thing. I'm like, listen, you could ride around here and see right now, it's a lot of low hanging fruit. You don't have to increase your budget by $1 million. You don't have to add 10 guys to your crew. You can do stuff that's going to wow this membership without spending a nickel, and then gain their confidence, gain their trust, and then start to build on that and say, now this is what we are being able to afford to do now. This is what I would like to do next year that's within reason. And in those first few years, you'll start building something with them, building trust and building a vision. And I think that's, every young superintendent really needs to hear that.
I'm laughing as you say that because I recently started providing the general managers in the clubs that we work with on the executive level, give one or two small little projects, not big, small, attention to detail items, things that you hear in the men's grill or Thursday ladies day group that comes out. What are one or two things that you consistently hear that maybe for whatever reason hasn't been a priority? What does that look like? Because that's how you're going to get your superintendent off to a quick win outside of the basic day-to-day operations. So It was funny as you were saying that. I was like, man, Jim must have been reading my mind or been in on some of these conversations I've had recently.
That's funny.
Jim, I appreciate you coming on today and congratulations, man. I've enjoyed, from afar and obviously through phone conversations and through the industry, I've gotten to know you a good bit, and this couldn't have been given to somebody more deserving than you. And I think that you represent the industry at such a high level, but just wanted to say congratulations from us, and we look forward to seeing you at the show.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see you soon.
where can people find and connect with you outside of here listening on the podcast?
I mean, I'm in all of the books and everything. I'm on Twitter at Jim Pav. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Jim Turfgrass, but I'm not hard to find.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.